And, which will you regret not doing more on your deathbed? That points you towards the thing you should do now.
That bit of brilliance was from my friend Neil Pasricha. Neil is a Canadian-born author and an amazing speaker. He's on the show today to help us overcome our anxiety, to make us happier, and he's a longtime author around a book franchise around being awesome. If these things are interesting to you, we're going to get really, really tactical in today's show about how to be more awesome, how to be happier, how to overcome your anxiety, including things that have to do with jobs and cell phones and where our attention goes. Yours truly and Neil Pasricha. Neil, welcome back to the show, man. It's been a minute. You are back.
Chase, thank you for having me back. I really appreciate it.
We had a lot of ground to cover, and I kind of wish we'd been recording the past 20 minutes of our little catch up because I always find those things to be fun. And yet, for some reason, I never hit record. So we're going to bring back some of that magic that's been going on for the past 20 minutes and we've been catching up. You got another book. You're fourth or fifth in the series. I've lost track because you're so damn prolific, which is a huge win if you are a creator out there. One of the reasons that our audience pays attention. I'm telling you, being prolific is incredibly valuable, but give us, orient us in time and space for those who may not be familiar with you or your work. Start off by telling us a little bit more about you.
Yeah, absolutely. My mom was born in Nairobi, Kenya. My dad was born in Amritsar, India. They had an arranged marriage in England. My dad performed the hamburger test. My mom ate the hamburger, proving she wasn't a vegetarian. Their second date was their wedding 2 weeks later. They emigrated to Canada in the late 1960s. My sister and I were born here. I was born in 79. She was born 81. Very, very lucky childhood. My parents doing all the hard work, teacher, immigrant accountant. And things are going pretty smooth sailing for me until my late 20s. In my late 20s, in the span of a few days, I lost everything. My wife, who I'd been in a relationship with for 4 years, we just bought a house, we're talking about having kids. She told me she was in love with somebody else, and she asked me for a divorce. 3 days later, my best friend, Chris, who I went to Harvard Business School with, and he lived in DC as a vice principal, he took his own life. And I was in a really bad state. I hadn't had any resilience training, put it that way, like through my life. I was relatively soft in terms of like the amount of childhood traumas I'd had, So this thing sent me reeling. I lost 40 pounds due to stress. I stopped eating. I stopped sleeping. I had to sell my house. I moved. I'm giving a eulogy at my friend's funeral. And it was weird because everybody at work was like, "You look great. What's your secret?" Right? I worked for 10 years in human resources at Walmart. I was, the two most interesting roles I had were director of leadership development for the company and project manager to our CEO. So what did I do? Chase? I started a blog. This was the blogger days. I'm talking 2008 vintage here.
Oh, yeah. I know that vintage well.
The typing how to start a blog into WordPress, into Google type. Clicking I'm feeling lucky and starting a work. My blog was actually called 1000awesomethings.wordpress.com, right? Like the WordPress was right in the URL, right? And so I decided for the next 1000 straight days to try to cheer myself up by writing about a simple pleasure. And while that goal might sound, oh, wow, he really turns his head around. No, I mean, my first post was Broccoflower, the strange mutant hybrid child of nature's ugliest vegetables. I'm not lying when I say nobody read this blog except for my mom, but I always joke that she sent it to my dad and my traffic doubled overnight. And then it was like 10 hits a day. And then here's a couple throwbacks for you as well. I got on the front page of fark.com. FARK.com, which bills itself as the 6th largest social media site in the world. So this is kind of pre-Reddit and Dig even. Like Fark was kind of like, a links aggregator. Well, I got 50,000 hits in one day, Chase, on old, dangerous playground equipment, my 700-word essay about the joys of burning your legs on hot slides and falling into cigarette butts. That took my blog from a 10-hit-a-day blog to like a 3,000 or 4,000 hit-a-day blog. And then from there, some Reddit hits and some Dig hits turned my blog into I'm writing for an audience now, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 on a great day, visiting my blog to see what the daily awesome thing was. The blog won an award for best blog in the world from the International Academy of Digital Arts and Sciences in 2009. I was flown to New York City. I got this award. I come home to Toronto Agents are in my inbox, eager to sign me to a, you sign with the agent, they take 15% and then they auction it to publishers. 5 publishers bid on the blog version of, or the book version of my blog, which turned into a book that came out in 2010 called The Book of Awesome. So if you want my origin story, really everything starts in 2010 when that first book, The Book of Awesome, came out, a 400-page hardcover with literally just 1 to 3 page essays of simple pleasures: wearing warm underwear out of the dryer, getting called up to the dinner buffet first at a wedding, hitting a string of green lights when you're late for work, stuff like that. It was relatively G-rated, but it was acerbic and sarcastic as well, because that was the state of my mind. I was kind of in a dour, depressive state. So I'm writing about positive things overtly, but I'm also like, if you read the book, maybe it resonated, because it also is it's also pretty cynical,
Well,
even the word awesome alone was like slapped on it, it's like the
well,
book of
this is
awesome
this is
things.
kind of, to me, part of what I have understood about you and your brand. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show, you have, your own personality, as a lot of the, online folks are. You have 4 kids under the age of 6, I think, which
Under the
certainly
age of 8
drives a lot.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
under 8. Okay. Which certainly drives a lot of who you are, but also this joy part, this foundation, the awesome series of books. I know you've got journals and kids books and all kinds of stuff. You got a new one out about our book of awesome. And
Mm-hmm.
speaking of going back to the little things, putting warm underwear on after it comes out of the dryer, I want to start our conversation around gratitude. And you and I have long been champions of gratitude, but it is really, I think, it is a cornerstone of many of the most happy and fulfilled people's lives. So I would like you to share a little bit about, well, I know you have some morning practices.
Mm-hmm.
We now know a little bit of your history around gratitude,
Yeah.
coming out of grief and writing awesome things every day. But you formalized this now, and especially in your new book, Our Book of Awesome. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering if you shared that. Start there.
With the new book.
With the new book, we'll just start
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
you got to, I know you have a morning practice, you've got
Yeah, sure.
a dinner practice. I think some
Yeah,
of this stuff is interesting because the
absolutely.
concept of gratitude is nebulous unless we put a practice or a praxis to it. So
Yeah.
I'd like to hear that from you.
Absolutely. So 2 quick spoiler alerts on that story is, one, I got remarried, because you heard the 4, people hear the 4 kids. You're like, where'd they come from? So I got remarried. And in the process of marrying my much wiser and smarter than me wife, started writing books around happiness equation, resilience. That's, I think, when we spoke last time. You
Yep.
are awesome. And I will also just add the second spoiler alert, which is, I'm writing all this stuff not because I figured it out, man. Like most self-help is like the person needing it, right? Like Mark Manson gives a lot of fucks in online comments. That's for sure. Mark would tell you that himself. He's writing a book to tell you how not to do it, right? So
Yeah.
Neil Pasricha is not the awesome guy. He's someone seeking it. And my method of seeking was trying to take what you call this nebulous practices of gratitude and distill them down into simple tactical habits we can actually do. I have 2 today that actually 3 today that I kind of almost religiously do. Number 1 is I still write one awesome thing a day. It goes out, gets spits out in a 12 a.m. midnight email every single day. So it's not a huge email list, like how many people want to hear from me every day, right? But those that do get it. So I still force myself, because otherwise I miss a day. There's an email coming out. That's the first thing. Second thing is, yes, I start my day with 2-minute mornings. What is 2-minute mornings? Well, I'm glad you asked. I don't sleep with my cell phone. Right now, 95% of people sleep with their cell phone within 5 feet of them. And if you ask them, Chase, what you did before bed, set my fantasy football lineup, answer the Instagram comment, see what's going on Twitter, blah, blah, blah. What do you do when you wake up in the morning? Same stuff, man. I'm checking my boss emailed me, blah, blah, blah. Well, if we were like drinking a bottle of wine before bed every night, sleep within 5 feet of a bottle of wine, and drinking a bottle of wine when you woke up every morning, we'd have no problem calling you an alcoholic. Right now, our phone addiction is so invisible because we all have it. So my first thing is that phone's got to stay out of the bedroom. I sometimes erroneously bring it up there, It's got to go back down. I keep my charger in the basement. That's my secret. Charger stays in the furnace room, the most disgusting cobweb-filled room in my house. So I don't want to kind of go back down to send a late night email that I'm going to regret anyway. So then when I wake up, I got no choice. I got nothing around me. I either get up and leave, or I have this yellow book I keep on my bedside table called 2 Minute Mornings. You can do it on a cue card. You just write down, I will let go of, I am grateful for, there it is, and then I will focus on. So I will let go of, we can go into the history on this, but it's not just Catholicism, bless me, Father, for I have sinned, Buddhism, Mormonism, Judaism, Islam. Did you know almost all world religions have a form of confession or repentance like built into the practice? But did you also know the fastest growing religion in the world is none? None. The fastest growing religion in the world is none. So we aren't using these things. And so you got to look at the science. There's a great white paper in Science magazine called Don't Look Back in Anger, which talks about how when you have less regrets as you age, you live more content. I find, and it might just be me, but I don't think it is, I always got something I'm stressed about in the morning. I don't know why. I will let go of comparing myself to Ryan Holiday. I will let go of the stress I feel about a book launch. I will let go of that nasty thing I said to my sister a week ago that I still haven't apologized for. I will let go of yelling at my kid last night that I shouldn't have done. There's lots of stuff, and the darkest stuff you don't even tell people. It's just getting it off your chest, okay? Then I am grateful for. The research on gratitudes that I always quote is by Emmons and McCullough. And what they found is they compared 3 groups of people. Number 1, you write down 10 gratitudes a week. Number 2, you write down 10 events a week, just things that happened. And number 3, you write down 10 hassles. These are 3 different groups. Over a 10-week period, the ones who wrote down gratitudes were not just happier, but they were also physically healthier. I tell people this is the simplest go to the gym exercise. You don't even have to go to the gym. You don't got to buy the thing that shakes your belly fat off of late night TV. You don't even got to do nothing. If you just write down things that make you happy, you trip area 17 in your visual cortex. Turns out your brain doesn't actually know where it is, so you think you're there again. But the secret of this research, I think, is that it's got to be specific. And most people, Chase, when you ask them to write down gratitude, they write down my husband, my kid, my dog. It ain't going to work. It's got to be when my husband Chase put the toilet seat down, when my 5-year-old daughter Sonia learned how to ride with one training wheel, when the rescue puppy stopped peeing on my wife's pillows. Let's be specific, okay? Then I will focus on, that's because of decision fatigue. I carve one thing I will do from my endless could do and should do, and I think of myself as winning if I just cross that one thing off the next day. And if I don't, I just write it down again. So it's a 2-minute investment. All 3 prompts are research backed. And in my mind, it makes you happier for the other 998 waking minutes. Did you notice my blog's called 1,000 Awesome Things, and you're alive for 1,000 months? That's the normal lifespan, 1,000 months. And the average person's awake for 1,000 minutes a day. And my podcast right now is counting down 1,000 formative books. So I'm a sidebar. I'm obsessed with the number 1,000.
I saw the your gratitude practice in the Harvard Business Review, and I'm a fan of things that are easily understood through a simple package, and that is one of the things that you've done. I was intrigued to know, and looking back at some of your work at our previous conversations, there's something mentioned in your writing about a dinner practice.
Yes.
So that I would like you to also share, again, in this world of awesome and 1,000 and gratitude.
So the dinner practice
is dinner practice.
The dinner practice I stole from my wife, Leslie, and she stole it from camp. And at camp, when they were kids, they used to do something called rose, thorn, bud. You say your rose from the day, which is a gratitude or a positive thing, your thorn, something that didn't go well, and your bud, that's B-U-D, something you're looking forward to. And I just added a second rose, and then I put my name under it. Okay. Leslie and I joke about this all the time. She really is writing all my books. I'm just writing them down. So it's rose, thorn, bud. And what you do is, it's very awkward. Nobody wants to I say to my 5-year-old son, hey, what's your rose today? I don't know. No one wants to start that. So you have to start yourself. Oh, you know what? I found a perfect red maple leaf. It's my rose for the day. What about you? And if you start there, then everyone starts to say a rose. We go around. We sometimes say, like, did you say one yet? Did you say one yet? And if we have the energy, we do a second one. Then we say a thorn. And the goal there is just to listen, not solve the problem, like, a lot of people want to do. And then a bud, something you're looking forward to. It doesn't matter if it's like make pancakes on Saturday or like rent a villa in Tuscany when I'm 100. It just can be something in the future. I've been getting emails from people who do this practice, Chase, and people say, "Oh, I've started adding like a prick, or I've started adding like you can take the packaged product that we're talking about today and make it work for your purposes. If you live alone, you might do it over FaceTime with your grandma. It's all good, but the point of it is that it puts into a simple way the thing we know that works, which is remember 10 gratitudes a week is going to make you happier and physically healthier. But you don't just carry around a journal. So let's make it a game at dinner. Rose, thorn, bud, a simple gratitude game around your dinner table.
Well, this is one of the things that I liked about that and why I wanted to capture it in our show here is we talk a lot about personal development and growth and presence and awareness and whatnot, but we also need to be teaching this to our kids and the next generation because we didn't have these things growing up. And that simple tool, a gratitude practice, as an example, I've shared mine online, is transformative. It is, in and of itself, that little package is a power. It packs a powerful punch. So thank you for sharing that. I think this as a way to, integrate the family, whether that's at the dinner table or the breakfast table.
What's yours? I'm sorry that I don't know.
It's basically similar. It's not 2 minutes. I call it 10. It's a version of what Tony Robbins puts out there, which is there's a little breath work at the beginning. There's a gratitude, 3 things that you're really gratitude for. I actually send gratitude out into the world to other people that I saw the day
Nice.
before who I feel like might be in need. Because we all know folks like that, but similar. It's under 10 minutes.
You jump
And
into a plunge pool at the end too?
I usually do that before the plunge. Yes, I did that this morning. It's getting
Nice.
really cold, my cold plunge, because it's getting very cold up here in Seattle again. It's heading into that season. So yeah, that's the first. And I do that when I'm intentionally sort of fuzzy. I often will combine that with, 10 minutes of writing. Today, I only wrote 2 sentences in my writing because my gratitude practice went a little bit long and I didn't have that much to say because I was anxious to get in the I get in the hot tub first and then the cold plunge. So I was anxious to get in the hot tub, but it's a similar thing, right? I'm talking about a package that, again, mine is individual. What I was inspired by for yours and what I think the listeners might get out of is, how you share this with your family at the table.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
And everyone's got, just to throw another, wrench in here. My wife has been, because this will probably be a thing I talk about later. My wife has introduced a new one called high low buffalo, where you say a high from your day, a low from your day, and a buffalo is something interesting or strange or weird. It's just like the buffalo, the surprise of your day. So that's just another one if people want to pick up. If people are
right.
collecting gratitude practice, we've now given you 4. Okay.
Right. Well, and it, one of the things that I'm aware of, why gratitude, I think, has been, I think it played a role prior to the pandemic, but of course the pandemic was very hard for a lot of people, and the gratitude, those who picked up or adopted a gratitude practice, I think the science is coming out that helped during that very difficult time, and one of the other things that was going on was a lot of discontent with jobs and careers. And that's one of the major things that the people who listen to the show, watch the show, pay attention to, because they are either on their own, or have gone out on their own recently, are aspiring to do that, or are very entrepreneurial. They work at a company and they are looking to make
Yeah.
change and become a leader within an organization. And so, as the counselor of awesome and someone who's written for, I guess a decade or more on happiness, I'm wondering if we can sort of dig into a little bit of what you think with all of the career shifting that's going on. We hear about quiet
Hmm.
quitting and the great resignation, the great transition.
Yeah.
I'm fascinated about your
Mm.
points of view around what helps people figure out if they are in a happy role.
Yeah, for sure. I got lots to say about this. two things I'll say. Well, number one is for anyone that's right on the precipice of pondering a change, like you have a bird in hand, which is your current role, and you have, you're going through an interview process maybe somewhere else, or you're thinking about making the leap and starting your own company, or you and a few friends have got a side hustle that you're wondering about leaning into, whatever. The two questions that I had, so I worked 10 years at Walmart, and before leaving Walmart in 2016 to do kind of writing full time, I called my old boss, who at that point was the CEO of Walmart International. Okay. And so it was like hard to just get his time, but I got his time and I said, Dave Cheesewright is his name. I had just taken a sabbatical to like explore this. I'd come back, but I was very trepid. I have an East Indian background. My parents wanted me to be a doctor. I already failed by, not being a doctor, never mind not having a pension or benefits or a stable career, so I was like, it's a pretty big leap for me. I called him up. I was like, Dave, how do I know if I should quit Walmart or not? And he's like, there's just two questions. Number one, you got to do the deathbed test. Which will you regret not doing more on your deathbed? Okay. And, which will you regret not doing more on your deathbed? That points you towards the thing you should do now. And then the second one is the plan B test. Like, what if this whole thing fails, Neil? What if you go out and be a writer and you suck at it, or you don't get any speeches that pay the bills, or blah, 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 blah. And I was like, well, I guess I'll have to call you up again. Or I guess I'll have to dust off the LinkedIn profile. And he's like, well, do you think you could do it? It's like, well, at this point now, 10 years of experience, and I feel like I could go back and get a job. He's like, well, there you go. Those are the two questions. So the first thing I want to say is, if you're on the precipice today, use those two questions as a bit of a guidepost to yourself, right? The deathbed question and the plan B question. Second thing, though, I'll say is, I don't believe that the fundamental things that we desire in a successful career, whether they are a one-person company or you're working at a 2.5 million person company like I was, really change. To me, I distill them down to what I call the 4 S's. Okay, there are the 4 things you need to have in a fulfilling career. The first one is social. We are social animals. Daniel Gilbert wrote the original book in positive psychology called Stumbling on Happiness. He's a very famous sentence in it that I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember off by heart, but it's like, if I could know everything about you, your gender, your nationality, your religion, your income, all of that would fall away as a measure of your happiness in favor of the strength of your relationships with your friends and your family. That is the determining factor more than the other things. So we want to be social at work. I think that the move to hybrid and to virtual work has been really devastating for a lot of our social connection and our social needs. And I see this in lots of places as a speaker. Like, I used to speak down in Toronto here at Shopify at the lunchroom, and to get 500 people together, and there's an energy, and and I talked to them. I was like, hey, I got a new book coming out. Our Book of Awesome is coming out December 6th. Do you want me to come down again? Like, for free. I just like to get out there and talk to them about the book. And they're like, we never get together anymore, ever. It's like, yeah. Oh man, that stinks. But we need social connection. Okay. There's a reason that some companies actually ask their employees, do you have a best friend at work? Or even, do you have friends at work? It's as simple as that, social. The second thing is stimulation. We are learning animals. You know this better than almost anybody. We crave learning. Are you learning something new every day? And if you aren't learning something new every day, are you learning something new every week? If you are atrophying in your role, it's a sign that it's time to move. Okay, so just, are you being stimulated? Are you being challenged? Okay. The third one I talked about is structure. I know every week has 168 hours in it. I believe it's nice to carve that into 3 buckets of 56. You got 56 hours for sleep. That gives you 8 hours a night. You got 56 hours for work. That's 8 hours a day, including 8 hours a day on weekends that you might not need, but depends on your job. And you got 56, which is your third bucket, for anything else you want. My point is, the work bucket and the sleep bucket pays for, justifies, and creates that third bucket. And for you, it might be the bodybuilding side hustle you're doing. It might be you're deep into fantasy football. It might be raising your infant son. Doesn't matter what it is. But I think that most people, I used to say, oh yeah, kids need habits. Kids need schedules. Kids need routines. Well, now I think everyone needs habits. Everyone needs schedules. Everyone needs routines. So just having the structure of a reason to get up in the morning, a place to go, a reason to get dressed up, kind of creates the fact that you don't feel guilty now when you do nothing from 5 p.m. to midnight or whatever that is for you. Okay. Structure. And the fourth S is story. Story. Am I part of something bigger than myself? Do I personally ascribe or align with the highest level purpose, mission, or values of the organization? And every organization has a purpose, its ultimate reason for being. Is that something that resonates with you? I will say at Walmart, I did get off on the fact that the goal of the company was saving people money so they could live better. Because, partly maybe it was corporate branding or whatever, but at the shareholders meeting, you'd have like people getting on stage saying like, our family, in Guatemala could afford, to have Christmas this year because, we were able to get toys for our kids, which you wouldn't get before because of Walmart entering. And, you can kind of look at that kind of stuff and sort of be cynical about it. But from the company's perspective, and I was internal there, it really did feel like a real reason for being. You were lowering the cost of living. And if you didn't shop at a Walmart and you had one open in your community, your cost of living went down by like $2,500 a year, even just by not shopping there. So this is kind of like pre-Amazon days, but at the time, Walmart was doing something that was something I could get behind. If you can't get behind that high level story of your organization, it's also a sign that you may not just be aligned with kind of the work you're doing. Together, those add up to social, stimulation, structure, and story. They're a quick little 4-bullet test to see whether or not you feel congruent with the work you're doing.
Nailed it. I had a cheat sheet in front of me, so I could see those things. Again, there's one of the sort of the key things that underpins not just this show, but I believe the lives of the most happy and most importantly fulfilled and successful, not just successful, fulfilled and successful people is some modicum of structure. And I remember early on in my creative career, just like, you can't keep me down. I'm going to wake up and I want to, oil paints one day and, pictures the next. And when I'm, inspired, I'm going to chase it. And what you come to find out is that's not actually true for the most happy, fulfilled, and successful people. There's some modicum of structure in that. I mean, if you're listening right now and you're new to Neil, you can already tell he's got a lot of structure in his life. He sent me an outline of things that he was interested in. Like this, this is the brain of someone who is organized. And to that end, the next thing I'm interested in hearing from your structured organization, and also obviously wildly creative, and your brain goes in a lot of different places. I want to talk about the relationship that you have as a very successful public speaker, author. You mentioned being at Walmart, transitioning into self-employed, where you're writing and speaking full time. This, almost by definition, changes the relationship that you have with the rest of your family. Especially, you mentioned your Indian heritage, where you weren't a doctor and you didn't have a pension.
Yeah.
And if I'm, thinking about one of the most important questions for listeners and watchers of this show, it is really around how do I have this relationship with my family? Because for many, their spouse or partner is frightened by the fact that they might not have this pension, or they might, as an independent artist, again, whatever station in life you're at or wherever you're at in your career arc, these stories and these relationships that we have with our families around our work lives, they can be different. But I was inspired, and I remember we touched briefly on this, I think, the last time we spoke, but I'm hoping you can reorient us towards the sort of quarterly meetings that you have with your partner.
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, I want to say thank you for the compliment around the sort of structure and systems. Look, it comes from a place of need, and it comes from a place of not being that structured. These things are created as North Stars in my life. And do I always hit them? No. Do I always do 2-minute mornings? No. Do I always do Rose Storm about a dinner? No. But by having them as systems and as North Stars, I'm always just improving along the line. So I don't want to say that I'm perfect at any of this stuff. Now, on the quarterly meetings, okay, so...
And this, just just to be clear, I'm using quarterly meetings as an example, but the macro point that I want to hear from you around is the relationship that you have with your family and how your career sort of fits in there. Because for a lot of people, this is a big deal. If they want to go in this direction, this is the number one or number two blocker. And
Yeah.
if they are in it and they're not a good communicator, or not maybe a less good business person, and like figuring this part out is also a major challenge. So
Yeah.
I'm using your quarterly meetings as an example, but I know you talk about family contracts and
Yeah.
nights away and special
Yeah.
time and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So what I do is at a high level, there's a couple things that are happening here. Number one is I copied something. As you can tell, most things I do or anyone does are really copies. But on the wall at Walmart, there used to be the company strategy. And in the center of a box that looked like this, okay, there was a square and it said, "We save people money so they can live better." That was the highest level purpose. I like the phrase ikigai better, Ikigai, which is the Okinawan word for the reason you get out of bed in the morning. For those that don't know, Dan Buettner and a team of National Geographic researchers studied the blue zones, or the places where people live to 100 more than anywhere else. And guess what? In Okinawa, they don't even have a word for retirement. They don't have a word for stopping doing stuff. They only have a word called ikigai. Well, in the center, I write my ikigai, which is helping people live happy lives. So I write that down, and I can change it it might be getting my manuscript in or for the next month. You can make it more tactical if you need to, but just go up to the highest level reason for being for you. I'm not saying it's easy to come up with, but just gestate on it. I write that in the center. And at the end of every month, I have a 12 bullet point thing I write on a cue card, as you can see if you're watching this on YouTube. And in the top left, I write down strong core. Well, this is the cash flow stuff. Okay. So for me, it's like I write one chapter of a book, right? I record 2 podcasts of 3 books, my podcast, and I give 4 speeches. Okay. Well, only the speeches of all those 3 things pay any money, but the other 2 things are ingredients to learning and writing and things that will eventually pay money. Or really, that's kind of the art I want to create, even though it's not monetized. And I do think for most people, the metaphor of, an artist these days, like a recording artist, they put out an album that nobody buys, but then they tour for a concert and people line up to pay $100 for a ticket. So it's not dissimilar in the nonfiction book space where, everyone's putting out books, it's pennies on the dollar for royalties, but it's a speech that is kind of like the touring part of it. Okay. We do really want experiential things. We need that human connection. So every month I write down either a green, yellow, or red dot beside those 3 things. Okay. Green means I nailed it. Yellow means I was close, and red means missed. Okay. The top right is fastest learning. I talked about the ingredients towards the cash flow, but just think about the ingredients towards a life for a second. Every single month, I want to be the fastest learner I can. So what does that mean? It means that I want to read 8 books a month. I put that as my goal. That's 2 books a week. It sounds like a lot, but if you cut out all your magazines, newspapers, and TV shows, it works. And so I do read over 100 books a year now. I copied Ryan Holiday's monthly book club as a way to commit to it and send out an email list. That email list has grown by leaps and bounds over the years. And it's great because that provides even more motivation and pressure for me to read, because now I have to tell everyone every month what I'm reading. So I say that I'm going to read 8 books. I say that I'm going to have one weird experience. That's an interesting one. Every month I want to do something out of my comfort zone. It might be being at the mosh pit at a Flaming Lips concert and catching the set list after the show. Yeah, I got this after the show. They put it out in the leaf blowers and they fire them from there. Flaming Lips are the best, my favorite band. And then I might put 2 interviews. Okay, so this kind of feeds into my pockets, but that's all just learning stuff. Again, it's yellow, green, or red. The bottom right, and this is partly what you're asking about, I call it best family. Okay, so I want to think of myself as having the best family. Do I always nail it? No, but I say specifically, I want to have 4 or more, so greater than or equal to 4 family days a month. A family day, as I define it, is a day where it's me, my wife Leslie, our 4 little kids, and nothing else. No screens, no interruptions, no visiting in-laws, no birthday parties, it's just the family is in like a cocoon. We could do something together, and those days are really precious and profound, and they are nitro to the relationship. So I want 4 or more of those per month, and that works out to, of course, once per week. I want to be less than or equal to 4 nights away per month. So this is a real pickle. we're speaking right now in November 2022. I gave 10 speeches in October. How? And why is there 10 more that I didn't do? Well, because I said to the speaking agent, I can't be away more than 4 nights. So I flew to Nashville and back, the same day to give a speech, and said no to things that were really far away, and did a couple that are local in Toronto. You see, so we kind of made it work, but I have a really hard and fast rule. I cannot go more than 4 nights away from my family. At least to some crazy things like flying to Nashville at 5 a.m. and getting home at midnight and saying, I'm here, when you weren't really there, were you? Because I gamified my own thing. So you have to look at the spirit behind the numbers, but the numbers help. So less than or equal to 4 nights away. And then the other one is 4 NNOs. So I'm Neil. So an NNO is a Neil's night off, 1 a week, 4 a month. Leslie gets an LNO. That's a Leslie's night off. I have one tonight. She had one last night. Last night, she went for a birthday dinner with her sister and her mom. Okay. So they're both their birthdays. And tonight, I haven't made plans yet. But a friend of mine texted me, and I can actually do it, even though I have kids, because we want to have new stories in our relationship. We want to have new growth opportunities that aren't together all the time. So we have 1 night a week that's off, and that fills us up in a different way. And then the bottom right quadrant of my now getting increasingly hard to read little dashboard is called Best Self. This stuff is usually red for me. It needs to be better, but it's 12 workouts per month, 12 cardios per month. It's the taking care of myself stuff. Okay. I write this dashboard at the end of every month, and I colored the little dots, green, yellow, and red. I have an example I can send you if you want to throw it in the show notes for people to see. And I have an article I wrote about this from the Toronto Star. So that kind of governs me as a dashboard. The word dashboard is important, by the way, because when I'm driving 60 in my car, I'm never going 60. I'm going 64, and then I slow down a little bit, or I'm going 50 and I speed up a little bit. Well, this is the same idea. You're going to have top left be all green, but then your bottom right's red. Or you're going to have the bottom right. You're taking care of yourself and your family, but now you stop making money. So you see, the whole point is not to get the whole thing green. It's just to steer. It's just a loose steering mechanism. Now, Leslie and I can't do anything unless we have some models around our lives. So one principle that we stole again from Martin and Farah Perlmutter, who run a speaking agency called Speaker Spotlight. It's the largest speaking agency in Canada. They're a husband and wife. They own the speaking agency. And they said to us one night over dinner years ago, we think of Martin as CEO of the business and Farah as CEO of the family. And that stuck. And we use that now. And the reason it's effective is because they're both very lofty titles, CEO, and they're equivalent titles. CEO. There's no one worth more than the other there, right? You're not overvaluing one, but they also then bake into the definitive decision maker of both. Leslie will sometimes say, well, as CEO of the family, they can have dessert, even though I was going on some rant about sugar, like I used something, whatever I was, and she'll be like, well, I'm CEO of the family. I don't care. I can have ice cream. Right. And I'm CEO of the business. So I'd be like, I really, this is a really, I know it's a really hard trip, but it's really important for the book. And I know I'm going to miss your sister's birthday party, but I have to do it. So we can enable each other to make the crucial decisions. And then we also have a date night once a week, which I want to tell everybody who has little kids, who never has a date ever, that this is so important to play for. It's worth whatever you'd pay in a babysitter. And it is so critical. For us, a date night means more intimacy in every sense, like intellectual intimacy, physical intimacy, psychological intimacy. All these things go up when you're together with the one person that you fell in love with, that you forgot about because all week you've been chasing your kids or you've been working on your stuff. So for us, it's precious time. And if we don't get it, we notice. If you miss our date nights for a couple of weeks, there's some little bickering starting now, or like we're a little short with each other, right? Mm-hmm. And we have, as you mentioned at the beginning of this question, before I jumped into the other 3 models, we have a quarterly meeting. The quarterly meeting between us is a relationship meeting. We have this, by definition, outside of our house. I stole this idea, by the way, from Professor Dave Ulrich at the University of Michigan. He does this with his wife. And everybody will have different topics that they discuss. Him, I believe, the topics were, and he was open about this, he said they were money, time, sex, and family. It was like, those are the 4 big buckets. So money, Like, how often does a couple in a relationship actually sit down and say, so money, what, are you good? Are you happy with what we're doing here? Or you think we're really rich or really poor, or you want to change stuff? Or this is where we might say, oh my gosh, we need to like think of a philanthropy strategy. Or we might think of like, you know what, we're destitute here. I think you need to take a second job. Time to drive with the Uber, right? Like whatever it is, you got to have that conversation. Sex goes without saying. If you don't have a place to talk about it, it could wither away and die. And I say this as someone who was in a marriage before this one, okay? And then, you know, when we divorced, it was my wife whose idea it was. I was just like, well, I guess no one. The joke is that you don't have sex in a marriage. Isn't that the joke? Like I was kind of clueless to the fact that like, no, you can. You have to just talk about it. Say openly, you know, what we have to, and these things shift all the time based on age and who's breastfeeding and who's traveling and what. Let's just talk about it. Safe space. Then, and by the way, the conversations get more and more intimate the more often you have them, right? So you can start off by just saying like, are you happy? And then you can, you know, by doing this after a year, you're talking about like, you're doing like long quizzes and talking about kinks or whatever it is, you know, you go wherever you takes you. And then I think the last one was family. So this is a really healthy one, especially if you like us have lots of extended family, because I have found in relationships, it's just important and healthy to constantly discuss and examine how often do we want to see your parents? How often do we want to see your parents? How often do we want, if we don't make that clear to ourselves, then it will not be executed in a clear way. And it doesn't mean it's perfect. It just means let's at least talk about it. So for me, I'll just share openly. Why not? You get me going. Is we've decided that we're going to see my family every 2 weeks. We've come up with a number that works for me. It works for Leslie. It works for my family. I've been open with my family about that. My parents. It's like every couple weeks we're going to see, and they live nearby. They live nearby, but I'm not talking about like flying across the country here. But just having that as a rule of thumb is really helpful. And then we just examine it. They're getting old. Let's make it weekly for the next year, you know, whatever it is. So that's where the quarterly meeting comes in. It's also a great time to talk about like, you know, I really, really, really want to go on a vacation. You said we read or whatever it is, you can bring it up there.
Yeah. Make them up with money or family or
exactly.
Parallels to go off on there. So I'm thinking again, in service of our community, and I mentioned earlier, one of the things I love about you and your work around the awesome, I don't even call it a franchise. You're the awesome guy, you know, the happy guy. You get coined those things on, you know, television shows and podcasts and whatnot. There are, like, it would be unfair to talk about all that stuff if you didn't talk about things that you should steer clear of or moderate, because we're talking about very proactive things, right? Making meetings with your family and gratitude practices, and very tactical. And again, this is one thing I love about your work, is it's very organized. Let's turn your organizational attention now, if we can, to some of the things that we should not be doing, or things that rather maybe inhibit or obfuscate happiness for us. And I was struck in your work around the talk about cell phones. And you already mentioned, you know, this idea of not sleeping with your cell phone. It's not revolutionary. There's a lot of people who talk about that, and who employ that as a tactic.
Yeah.
But I'm curious that you had something that struck my attention around the 3 Ps of cell phone. And you were very clear. You called it addiction.
Yes.
So these are things that, you know, this is maybe negative reinforcement. What are things we don't want to be doing? If happiness is important to us, what are 3 things, the 3 Ps of cell phone addiction?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, why am I so focused on cell phone addiction? As always, I'm addicted. Okay. So like, it's coming from a place of me noticing that the D-score data, which is a US market research firm that says we touch our cell phones 2,500 times a day, which is more like a constant fondle. I'm like, yeah, like I was like, that's true. Like I wasn't like one of these people that's like, gasp, what are you talking about? I was like, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, of course I'm doing that. And so what are the 3 problems of cell phone addiction? They all start with the letter P. Number 1 is psychological. this conversation is not big enough in society right now. Everyone says this phrase, and I agree with this phrase. We compare our director's cut lives with everybody else's greatest hits, right? We know that. What we haven't yet examined, because we haven't had enough longitudinal data to see how it affects people that are like, in their 20s or 30s or 40s now that kind of have grown up in this environment, is what does it feel like to know that you will never be the best at anything? What does that do to you? Because when I was a kid, Chase, I could see the best basketball player at my high school team. That guy was good. But I thought if I practiced every single day and I went to the tryouts and I could get there. Well, now someone's on YouTube with a blindfold on, throwing basketballs over their head backwards from half court, getting swishes every time. What I'm saying is the bars have changed. You can never have enough likes, enough friends, enough followers, enough. You can never have enough. You called me prolific, and I said I will let go of comparing myself to Ryan Holiday. Well, in my mind, he's prolific. In my mind, that guy's putting out 2 books a year. I only have one every 3 years. He's 6 times more books than me. So, but for him, he's probably like looking at Joyce Carol Oates, or whatever, right? Like I'm saying, there's no end to how psychologically inferior you can feel, and that is devastating. It just really, really feels like a trap when you go online, because you're comparing yourself to the best in the world at all times. Ugh. Psychologically, that's a problem. I believe that to be a big problem in society. I feel like for a lot of people, that is very demotivating. It brings up the why should I try? It brings that up because I'm never gonna have a podcast as big as Chase's show. So why start one podcast? I'm only gonna get like 12 people listening. Why start? And you therefore lose all the learning you would have got, the joy of doing it. All these other elements get dissipated because we are comparing ourselves. So psychologically, it's a problem. Second one is physical. I'm going to start with the actual body for a second. When you look at your phone, you're applying 60 pounds of pressure to your spine. Okay, that's the first thing. Second of all, you're really killing your thumbs. I went to the physiotherapist last week because my thumb stopped working. I couldn't move my left thumb. She says, all we're doing is thumbs now. All we're doing is there's like a little muscle in here that you're just killing when you do it when you're on your phone. So if your back hurts, if you're listening to this right now and your back hurts or your neck hurts or your shoulders hurt, I'm telling you the reason why is that we're crunched over these things. But here's another physical problem. Research from Australia shows if you look at a bright screen, I hate to say this number because it's shocking, 2 hours before you go to bed, your brain does not produce enough melatonin overnight. Your pineal gland in your brain does not secrete enough melatonin to have a deep, restful sleep. In fact, evolutionary biologists are now suggesting that when you turn off your phone, you get a boost of energy. Your primal brain wants to build a fire and set up your cave. So for millions of years, you've actually needed more energy when the sun went down. So there's a physical problem there, okay? There's also a productivity problem. Our phones are, we know this, shrinking our attention spans, okay? Look at the prevalence of TikTok. I mean, I can't even watch it because it's so jarring and senselessly moving and bouncing. And I'm a pretty fast talking guy. And for me, it's overwhelming, right? So how do you think you're going to engage in reading Tolstoy after that, or anything with a vastness and an emotional depth that could not otherwise be reached through the spirit of a longer time? So what we're doing is killing our attention and our productivity. That's the P. So 31% of our time on our phones is spent bookmarking, prioritizing, and switching. Everybody knows what this is. What do you do when you want to watch a show on Netflix? You spend all the time trying to decide what to watch, right? Like you're like, do I want new and noteworthy? Do I want TV dramas based in a hospital? Do I want TV dramas based in a hospital just in the ER? And like and then you have to cross-reference it on Rotten Tomatoes, and you got to watch the trailer on YouTube because they don't put that in there because then it will prevent you from staying on. So you're just killing yourself. So just 3 P's of problems with cell phones. I think the biggest single change we need to do is get them out of the bedroom. And when I tell people about this, they have 2 big complaints, by the way, Chase. The first complaint everybody has is, this my alarm clock. When did we decide to stop? They're the cheapest things to buy at Walmart. They're less than $10. I have an alarm clock right here. This is the one I use. It's wonderful. It's white. I can send you the link if you want to put in the show notes. I buy them in bulk because it's small enough to fit in my suitcase. I leave one in my suitcase. I change it to whatever. Why do I have to take it in my suitcase? Because there's no alarm clocks in hotels anymore. There's just a charger beside the bed. Like, are you kidding me? I plug my phone in the bathroom when I'm in a hotel. So I want to just go right away and say, you got to buy an alarm clock. Okay, if that's your problem, buy an alarm clock. And then people always say, oh yeah, well, I'm very important. I could get called in the middle of the night. And to that I say, no, you're not. You're really not that important. I hate to tell you this. And if you really do have a sick sister who might text you at 3 a.m. or whatever, like, get a landline. The telecom companies are desperate to sell you one. It's $10 a month because no one wants one. And you give that number, the bat phone number, to your 5 closest people, your boss, your one direct report, your sick mother, your sick sister. And then knowing that your closest people have a way to reach you actually allows you to just go to bed and know, well, if there's an emergency, they can reach me. And so we have told all of our family members our landline. You don't know it. None of my friends. It's just, we've just told our parents and our sister, so emergency people. And then we say, call twice. Just call twice if you need us, because then not only will we hear it, but we'll be like, oh, it's our family calling. It's not a spammer. Who it's illegal in Canada, by the way, to call after 8 p.m. and before 8 a.m. So if you are paranoid of that, then you just turn your ringer on before you go to bed. I solved it for you. All you got to do is do it.
No, the cell phone thing is real. I think there's a lot of also commentary, or I would say self-commentary about, well, I'm actually working because I work in digital media, so I'm listening to this podcast or posting to Instagram or whatever, and yet what part of the way I think about the phone is just some sort of baseline discipline around it, whether it's the 3 Ps, for example, and being aware of them and how to counteract them, or just some sort of restriction. I love the restriction, in the bed, in the bedroom, for example. And I employ others at different times. I have found recently that my ability to set my phone down for long periods of time has dramatically increased because simply of intention. Like, I'm going to walk up to the coffee shop with no cell phone. How crazy
It feels
is
good.
that?
It feels weird at first, doesn't it?
Yeah, you feel naked. Like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, what happens if I get run over by a car? I won't be able to call 911, or these absurd things that pop in your
Yeah.
mind. Any other, on that same topic of things that we ought to be, as the guy who's, orients around awesome, and you're saying all these things for us to do. Any
Uh-huh.
other, I would call it genre of things. I use the phone because I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of people that are listening to the show
Yeah.
have a problem they over index on their phone. But are there any
Yeah.
other universes that are
Sure.
negative consequence that you think we ought to pay attention to in order to preserve, enhance, make our lives better, richer, or whatever?
Well, I have noticed in society, I haven't talked about this before, but I've noticed that there is a real conversation happening. Andrew Huberman has put out that really famous alcohol podcast, long form alcohol podcast that seems to show, or he seems to suggest that even small doses of alcohol can be detrimental to your brain. Now, I'm not him, so I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I've noticed a lot more like kind of like people are going to extremes on a lot of things. Like I will never have alcohol. I will never consume cannabis, or I will never consume sugar. Or I will never consume gluten. I will never consume dairy. I will never. There's a lot of that happening, and um, I really like the phrase from Sarah Silverman that she writes about in her memoir, The Bedwetter. And she talks about heavily, although there's no article online, but she talks about all the time, which is simply make it a treat. Make it a treat for assorted poisons you enjoy. I would just say the adage, make it a treat, is really beneficial. It's not dissimilar to the whole everything in moderation thing, but I think it avoids the snapback effect of everyone suddenly cutting out sugar, and then you suddenly stop cutting out sugar because it's Sugar's really delicious. What are you going to do? Never eat a chocolate bar again? So I just, I haven't got a formulated view on it, but I do think the premise of make it a treat is a nice, healthy thing to apply for. And I like to use the phrase assorted poisons, because you already know. You don't need anyone to tell you what you're taking that isn't good for you. If you're smoking, you probably know it's not good for you. If you're drinking, you probably know it's not good for you, but you do it anyway because you like it, and it's fine. But just make it a treat. And so I think that adage is helpful, and I'd like to codify it into something that works for me. But for now, make it a treat works.
I love it. I love it. Now, again, I'm gonna just plug the book here for a second. Our Book of Awesome, your first book back in the awesome category.
Yes, in a decade.
In a decade.
Uh-huh.
So again, congratulations. This is where you can find a lot of this information. It's brilliant. And also,
Did your copy ever arrive, by the way? Because I feel like I mailed it. It did?
Indeed.
Okay, good. Because we're having, I think there's just, I'm in Canada. So when I'm always like, did the things come? Did it make it?
I'm in South Canada, so it's basically
Yeah.
Seattle, I call it South Canada. I have a selfish question, and this is in an area that I am doing a lot of research, a lot of personal development. I'm writing a lot. In fact, that was what I was writing this morning when I mentioned it earlier in our show here. It is around fulfillment. And I believe there's a difference between success and fulfillment.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if when I say fulfillment, if you can tell me sort of what you think of, and as an extension of this question, what, not only what you think about, what are you reminded of, but what are some things that you actively do that you believe cultivate fulfillment in your life?
Yeah. So I struggle with this as well, and I wrestle with it as well. I always think about it as the paradox between ambition and contentment. It's like you have the ambition in order to achieve your goals, but what are you going to turn it off? You know what I mean? And then suddenly, so I also wrestle with this. It's a very big thing in my life as well. Why am I still writing books? Like the first book sold super well. I should be hang it up, Neil. Like you're done. But here's the thing. I'd say I'm gonna use another phrase borrowed from a mutual friend of ours, Jonathan Fields, who has a great phrase, and I don't know if he coined it or if he attributes it to someone, but he says, I want to live the life of an artist with the impact of an enterprise with fuck you money in the bank. I want to live the life of an artist with the impact of an enterprise with fuck you money in the bank. And I thought that's a really cool one. So I kind of, that's I had that one kind of floating around my brain like a fortune cookie. And then I have another one that I've sort of just been thinking about to myself lately, which is just success is, or you could say fulfillment is, I got to be careful because you want.
Yep.
So
I'm actually drawing a pretty serious distinction between the two and some of the new work that I'm.
Yeah. Well, the how you made it, at least to me right now, is could I have lunch with my wife? That is a weird little metaphor, but it belies a whole bunch of other things that would have had to have worked in order to get there. It means that we both have time in the middle of a weekday to have a connection together, like to have a bowl of soup. Not today, because I'm talking to you right now. But I mean, like, could I? Does that bloom frequently? Where she's like, are you around for lunch? Yeah. Are you free? And we just have lunch, me and my wife. Like, that's a really cool little metaphor for success to me. I think I like that one. And then, so I gave you one phrase, and then I gave you one like example of like when I have lunch with my wife, I'm like, I made it. I could sit in the backyard, I could look at the tree, and it's Tuesday. Like I'm doing that on a Tuesday. Like how did that even happen?
You're not going to be sitting outside very much longer in Toronto. It's November.
I know. It's going to get cold. But another thing Leslie taught me when I first started dating her, I told her I hate winter. It's so cold. My teeth are chattering. Brr. And she's like, okay, you live in Canada? Right away, she's like, you love winter. It's great. You need new boots. You need a new jacket. And we're going to get you into skiing because you just need to find things that you like to do outside. And now you're going to love it. And she's like, she's right. She just she chiropractic adjusted my mind about winter. Now I love winter. There's different bird. I got really into bird watching in the pandemic. There's different birds that come through in the winter. I'm like, oh, it's a good chance to see owls now. I'm into it. And then look, on success, you can define it any way you want. For me, in my life, I think I have to think of it as family first. Like, is the marriage strong, healthy, and satisfying for both people in it? Then that's the center point. Then are our kids, relatively, happy and well adjusted, and like, are they provided for, and are they attached to us, and that sort of whole body of work. And that's, by the way, where my wife has really started to really grow. She's becoming a parenting coach under the tutelage of Dr. Laura Markham, who I've had on my podcast, who's wonderful. Who wrote the book, if anyone's listening, who's a parent, Peaceful Parent, Happy Kids, which is just a wonderful book about how to control your own trauma and emotions so you don't manifest them on your kids, which is what all of us do. And then outside of those things, it's like, do we have the lifestyle that we need, not that we want? And Leslie is really, I come from an immigrant background. So I come from hard scrabble, scratch it till you make it. Like, my dad was like, wanted to make it by coming to the new world. And like, he really, really, so that's in me, right? Whereas Leslie kind of comes from, she wouldn't necessarily, so she comes from a family that did make it. Like, they made it a while ago, And so her view is somewhat different, which is that doesn't create happiness. I already know that. I went to private school in high school, and there was just as many, if not more, problems there. And so she is of the more aware vantage point of the fact that money is not necessarily an ingredient into happiness, and therefore we would be happy in a cardboard box as long as we loved each other. It's a healthy thing for me to have in my life, because otherwise, if I was with another person like me, we'd be cranking 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have somebody saying like, you got to be home at 4. The kids come home at 4. Dinner is always at 5. Bath is at 6. Bedtime's at 7. Man, I was putting 4 kids to bed by myself till 9:30 last night. And I was also enjoying it because I couldn't do anything else. I had to be with them. It was her L&O, remember?
Yeah. Her L&O. That's right.
So she was gone. I could.
Well,
the babysitter left at 8, and then the kids weren't asleep, and so we had to keep going. So, look, I didn't answer your question, but I gave you a bunch of things that prove to you that I'm still thinking about it.
Well, this is part of the journey, right? That's one of the reasons I'm asking and spending my time writing about it. And again, speaking of writing, congrats on your latest book, Our Book of Awesome, a celebration of the small joys that bring us together. It's out now. We'll time the podcast with your book hitting the streets. Congratulations. First new book from you in a decade. And where else would you steer our attention? Of course, we're very good at purchasing books and helping authors,
yes,
especially, or pre-ordering them. But
our Book of Awesome is just ourbookofawesome.com. Luckily, no one had bought ourbookofawesome.com, so I got it, and it's a 432-page hardcover from Simon & Schuster with over 500 awesome things. And I called it Our because I took out, I don't know if you saw this, I took out my face, I took out my bio, I took out my acknowledgments, I took out the dedication. The book actually culminates in a cacophony of awesome from voices that you can't see, but you can hear from around the world, getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller as the book progresses. So it just, then in the back of the book, because you have the galley, but the actual thing is just, the back of the book is 2-point font, another 200 awesome things that aren't in the book. That's it. That's the whole back.
And I'll give you a couple examples. The moment you first figure out how to whistle, knowing that you get to finish the juice so drinking right from the carton, trying an old pair of jeans and they actually fit. These are the whole back of the book. It's just it's a treat. It's a lovely little creative discovery. So
wait, you have that?
I'm looking at it.
Oh, wow.
This
cool.
is
That's
the
amazing.
jacket. This is the
right. Oh, that's great. That's amazing that you have that.
Not the galley. This is
Yeah. Well, Our Book of Awesome is for the book, and I'm just neil.blog. So if you want to check out anything I'm up to, it's just neil.blog. Neil.blog, still Tim Ferriss's idea.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being another guest, for coming back for a second appearance here. Congrats on the new book. Thanks for giving us a million things to take care of ourselves, our happiness, our attention, our gratitude for being in this world. And I appreciate you, my dear friend.
Thank you,
Until
Chase. Thank you for having me on. And people that want to hear Chase's 3 most formative books, come listen to him on my podcast next fall.
it's coming soon. Talk to you soon again, Neil. Thanks very, very much for being on the show. To everybody out there in the Chase Jarvis Show land, thank you so much for listening, watching. Until next time, we bid you adieu.